So that said, I'm going to now ask our panelists to talk. I hope I didn't take any thunder from you guys. I just kind of tried to sort of lay the groundwork, but all of the analysis and the sort of deep thinking that goes into this and explaining it and where they think it's going to go is all going to go with them. And we're going to start with Don Crane.
So I guess I push this little thing to on at this point. It's red. Is it green? Went green. Good. Thank you, Diana. So it's a pleasure to be here. Exciting times to be sure. The challenge we've been given, we three speakers, just to forecast what's going to happen over the next 12 months, which I find interesting because I could probably quite readily predict what might happen over the next 5 years or 10 years, because I think the macro sort of direction of where we're all going is pretty clear. The next 12 months actually is a little harder to talk about. It's very short term, so it'll be really an interesting kind of challenge. Quick word about CAPG, better update my bio, frankly. We Californiaized our name here a year or so ago in connection with our national expansion, as we've taken on members from outside of California, and we now have a lot of those. In fact, we have a footprint in 38 states, I think, in Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico. Kind of a sign of the times as the rest of the nation starts moving into risk contracting and so forth. Well, they look to CAPG for sharing best practices and so forth. Capitation is really what distinguishes CAPG. So almost all of my members have at least a significant percentage, if not over half of their revenue derived from prepaid capitation. So, you know, we're there in terms of risk contracting and alternative payment model, and we've been there for a couple or 3 decades, learning, trial and error, a few stumbles here and there to be sure, and not anywhere near the optimum or perfect state, but we've been at work at capitation for a long, long time, and we're now watching what I think is a movement towards that very same trend across the country. So that's CAPG. I think I've got 10 minutes or so here to kind of cover the subject. There were 3 things that I thought I would talk about. The first being the SGR bill. I'll talk about that at considerable length because I think that is huge, frankly, bigger for our purposes at least, or CAPG's purposes and maybe our purposes tonight, even than the Affordable Care Act. Hard to believe, but it's that big. Next, I'll say a word about ACOs because I think they're going to be sort of so important, both Medicare and commercial. And then finally, a word about sort of the marketplace and the consolidation and the like that we're seeing going on. So, SGR bill, so we all heard that, what was it now, 6 or 8 weeks ago, probably a good 2 months ago, the Congress passed the bill that fixed the whole SGR. They repealed the formula by which the Medicare fee schedule is updated or not updated each year. So we've read with, I think, frustration over the last, 13 years, how there have been patches and how they've had difficulty addressing increasing or not increasing the amount physicians are paid in Part B. So that's the professional side of Medicare. We're talking original or also known as traditional Medicare. So the Senate, all but 8 senators voted in favor of this bill, and all but 37 congressmen voted in favor of this bill. That bipartisan, bicameral vote with that kind of a margin is very important because it says something about the durability of that law as to whether it'll be repealed or replaced or something in the future, and also says something about whether either party, and in fact they have not, kind of claims an intellectual ownership over the contents of that bill, okay? So passed by a big margin. So what's that bill all about? Well, the headlines that it attracted were that it repealed the SGR formula, right? So all of a sudden we're not tied to kind of an arcane index that they continued to ignore. Instead, they've replaced it with a completely new system, and that's what I want to talk about because I think it is of really big importance, bigger even than the Affordable Care Act. So in 2010, we had the ACA. Obama signed it. It ushered in very important insurance reforms. It gave us the exchange. It gave us the individual mandate. It gave us, I think, another 30 million or so people covered, and in California now the uninsured rate's down to like 7%. So don't mean to belittle it. Its changes are deep, profound, and big, but for our purposes as a physician group, Professional Association. It did little, frankly, in terms of delivery model reform and payment methodology reform. Yes, there were little bits about medical home, and yes, the Medicare Shared Savings ACO program got its start, but not a lot of more, not much more than that in terms of delivery model reform. Race forward to now the SGR fix, though I don't think it was well known by anybody at the time, including not well known, frankly, by the congressmen and the senators that passed the bill. It included these provisions that created a very stark fork in the road. So come 2019, we're in 2015 now, physicians across the United States, all of them that are practicing any kind of Medicare, so we're talking about all the internists, so much of the spend is in Medicare, right? And it is indeed a market leader, and we'll talk about that in a minute. All of them are going to be facing two stark choices. They get to either join a MIP, a Medicare Incentive Payment Organization, or that route, not an organization, they either go the MIP route or they go the APM route. And the APM stands for Alternative Payment Model. So the MIP route is kind of the default one. And basically, it is a combination of three existing programs. I think they kind of create four of them, but it includes meaningful use. So the whole EHR adoption piece, PQRS, the kind of nascent quality measurement program within Medicare, and I think another program or two. So they're now going to be looking at resource utilization and quality metrics. All that gets rolled up into MIPS. And as physicians look at that fork in the road, they get to see that if they're in the top half of the class, there's going to be a curve. Medicare's going to measure physicians on their performance and grade them. If they're in the top half of the class, they stand to get bonuses. They get an increase on their Medicare Part B compensation. It's graduated, it's phased. It's, I think, in the first year 2%, and the year later, two later, it's 4%. Goes all the way up to 4%. So perhaps an attractive looking picture to some physicians. If they do really well, they can get some more money. But to do well in meaningful use and in those quality measures, you almost have to belong to an organized system to exchange data, store data, transmit data to measure quality, to satisfy the meaningful use requirements, phase 1, 2, and 3. You really, it's kind of hard to be Marcus Welby in an individual independent practice of old on a street corner. So, and then the other way to look at MIPS is if you're in the bottom half of the class, flip-flop that into a reciprocal and you'll face penalties in the same amounts. So you might not just get 100% of Medicare, you'll get 98, 96, all the way down to 91% of Medicare over the course of the years 2019 to 2025. So a physician will be looking at that fork of the road, and he may say, or she may say, look, I'm really good, I'm going to do well, I'll get paid more money, 5 minutes, thank you. Or I don't want that competition. They'll then look at the other fork of the road, and this is where I think 80% of the physicians are going to go. That is my prediction, and we'll see that by 2019 and subsequent years. It's in the alternative payment model where, on a relatively easy basis, if you have at the outset 25% of your Medicare business in a quote-unquote APM, alternative payment model, to be defined in regulations that have not yet been adopted, you'll get an automatic 5% bonus. Not just on the 25% that's in the APM, but all of your Part B business. So you have a relatively easy task. You'll just have to do something you may not have ever wanted to do, which is join an APM, which may be a synonym for IPA or ACO, frankly. And that goes on from from 2019 to 2025 or 2026, I think. And then after that point, there's a cliff, basically, where for everybody in an APM, you'll get, I think, a 0.75% increase in your Medicare fee schedule. If you're in the MIPS, you'll get, I think it's a 0.25% increase. So between those two forks in the road, physicians will see difficult and dangerous and not particularly lucrative and potentially, including penalties, or much easier. So I think they're going to take the APM route in droves. So I'm predicting by 2026 and thereafter, we're going to have 80% of the physicians in the United States are going to have at least a toe or maybe a leg in the water in terms of alternative payment models. So what might they be? Medicare shared saving ACOs. They might be bundled payment arrangements. they may be medical homes, they may be other programs generated by the Innovation Center or out of CMS. But this is going to represent a sea change for the United States. You can say goodbye to the sort of Marcus Welby, independent, utterly autonomous, disconnected, fragmented, fee-for-service physician. Medicare is leaving that in the rearview mirror. So the importance of that is beyond just Medicare, however, because it's certainly my view, and I think that of many people, that Medicare, as goes Medicare, so goes much of the market. Now, that's really true in some states, Kansas or something, you'll have Medicare having a big slice of the market and maybe one or two commercial plans. Now here in Southern California, we have a multiplicity of plans. It's probably less true, but even so, Medicare is a powerful market shaper. So I think as we look to the future, while I'm now predicting 6 years out and I'm violating my mandate of trying to guess what the next 12 months, you're going to start to see some recognition, people positioning. I think the AMA and CMA are going to have to wake up and see what they've done, basically. And people and physicians and organizations, IPAs are going to see this as a recruitment opportunity. And physicians will be moving into basically accountable kinds of systems where quality measures have a big impact on. So that's really number one. Number two, and I'll move pretty quickly here, we are soon to see the next batch of ACO regs. So I'm talking about the Medicare Shared Savings Program, which has been struggling, to say the least. The pioneers in California, I think only, or across the nation, only a quarter of them made any money. That's true of just the shared saving ACOs. It's been struggling. The design of it is difficult. It is an open network, go anywhere you want to, fee-for-service platform, and it has produced gains in quality, but it hasn't produced profits yet. So in terms of being a draw, it is not. If the new regulations don't fix that, I fear it's going to falter even more. So this one I will predict. In fact, we may see these regulations in like the next week. Our annual conference is next week, and so the timing, we got to get this right. But anyway, so we're actually hoping to see them like today. They're at OMB right now, so we may see them at any moment. So let's keep our eyes out on the ACO regs and think about their impact really on the attractiveness of Medicare ACOs. And the final point I'll make in my waning seconds here is, as always, the marketplace is going to be really interesting. So we've been seeing a lot of consolidation and mergers, hospitals buying hospitals, health plans purchasing groups, groups merging with groups. That kind of trend is going to continue. It'll probably accelerate. I think at its heart you will see a kind of gravitation towards physician groups where population health and population management is the name of the game. Thinking ahead towards risk-based models where quality is going to drive cost. That's where the competency is going to be needed, and that is what's attracting health plans and hospitals, and that's why they're acquiring physician groups. So there's my hook. So there's my 3 points, and those are my predictions.